Support Narativ's independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative and check out our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe and download.
Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of Narrative Live. We are live with LB in LA and Greg Oliar. I don't even know where you are. I think you're in New York. I think you are.
I'm in New York.
Yep. I got it right too, your name. I have a jar over here every time I get your name wrong. It's $1 for somebody. Last week on the show, you might have caught our very, very special guest who joins us from time to time, talking about Steve Hoffenberg, I should say, who talking about his relationship with Roger Stone and what happened during that time in 2016 when he happened to hear Roger Stone talking about, maybe wanting to commit a crime with WikiLeaks. So that caught everyone by surprise. It had the audience by surprise. And we wanted to get him back on the air to talk a little bit about that experience. So we're going to play two parts of an interview we did this afternoon that was, I think, really interesting, really telling about all of that. So that's coming up on the show.
Okay. Okay, yeah, it is.
Go ahead.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. Go ahead, Al.
I just want to say my piece. I'm sorry, I was trying to get, because people wanted to see the link. And so I just tweeted out the links. But okay, everybody. I think this is something that might be part of my sort of whispering thing because of the world that I'm in and the people I'm used to speaking with and talking to. And I want everyone to sort of learn from Steve Hoffenberg. There actually is a teachable moment here with him, where he's a very good teacher in something very specific that I think we all will benefit from. So this is a man speaking to you from a perspective from a different world. It's a different world. And he has experience that you're not going to find anywhere else. He was not only a firsthand witness and a participant in a huge part of Jeffrey Epstein's life, but he paid for the crimes that he committed with Jeffrey Epstein. He was in prison for 18 years. And he's come out of that. When he went in and our world was very different than when he came out. And he has a very unique perspective and a very unique experience. And so you're going to hear him speak about things like the Board of Prisons and what that means, and Donald Trump and what was going through Donald Trump's mind when he was saying what he was saying. That is coming to you from somebody who knows this person, our president, very, very well. That is coming to you from somebody who knows Ghislaine and knew Jeffrey Epstein very, very well and has a very specific point of view to share with you. And you don't really know where he's going to go with this. And that's the lesson. The lesson is he's talking about a person in Ghislaine and in the president as well, that we all feel, we can feel the wounds of the victims. And Steve feels those wounds as well. And so we can feel that. Some of us have had our own traumatic experience that gets conjured up, right? And all these emotions are happening around Donald Trump and around Ghislaine and this subject matter. And there's all this disinformation out there, and there's all this conspiracy shit going on. And everybody's really heightened right now. Anyway, and so what I'm going to ask you to do is just calm your brain. Learn how to put your emotional brain on a pause. I'm not asking you to put your morality aside. It doesn't have anything to do with that. I'm asking you to switch into a different part of your brain where you can take this information in and really grasp what he's asking you to process. And I promise you, it doesn't go where you think it's going to go. Okay, so
all right.
You just got to stick in
I like
there.
that. I'm in that
and
mode.
Learn that muscle. Learn that muscle. And Greg and I will talk about how we went through an experience with with a totally different thing where people were in that emotional state and couldn't hear very important information that we were trying to get out at the time that would have helped everyone. So anytime there's sexual violence and money, we need to focus on the money.
Right.
And when it comes to processing things, when it comes to processing it, don't stay in the pain. Don't stay in the pain. You won't be able to take in information. So learn that skill now. This is an opportunity for everybody to learn that if you don't know how to do it already.
All right, so that's a good way to start. Let's take a listen to the interview we just did earlier on with Steve Hoffenberg.
Roger Stone invited me to work with him in the PAC, and I rejected the criminality of the Roger Stone approach with WikiLeaks and the confusion that you asked to clean up was when I said law and order, I linked it in. Roger Stone invited me to work with him in the PAC, and I rejected the criminality of the Roger Stone approach with WikiLeaks and the confusion that you asked to clean up was when I said law and order, I linked it in. Roger Stone invited me to work with him in the PAC, and I rejected the criminality of the Roger Stone approach with WikiLeaks and the confusion that you asked to clean up.
Okay, so that's hilarious and also not great for this amazing setup you gave us. Let me try to figure out what happened there. We might have to do things in reverse.
Okay, it's okay.
We'll do things in reverse. We're going to start with part two. So we're going to give the reveal away. The second part of the interview is the newsy part of the interview. We spoke about Ghislaine Maxwell and about Donald Trump's comment yesterday during a coronavirus press conference of all things. He spoke about Ghislaine Maxwell in the middle of all of that. Let's start with a comment from Donald Trump. And then afterwards, right away, we'll go into the interview and get Steve Hoffenberg's reaction to that. Here's the comment from Trump first.
Question. It's a little bit a different topic, but it's one that a lot of people are talking about. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison, and so a lot of people want to know if she's going to turn in powerful people. And I know you've talked in the past about Prince Andrew, and you've criticized Bill Clinton's behavior. I'm wondering, do you feel that she's going to turn in powerful men? How do you see that working out?
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach. But I wish her well, whatever it is. I don't know.
Well, the thoughts are very concise. He was taken aback and off guard, and he went into an emotional answer. And you could see his tone change to a concern and a worry. And I believe what he was concerned about is the risk assessment of the prison that Ghislaine Maxwell is in. The news cycle has been covering every day that she's got to be transferred into witness custody. Otherwise, she'll die in prison like Jeffrey Epstein died in prison. And that, I believe, was on his mind in when he said he knew her, which he does. His first wife was her friend, her good friend.
Right.
He
knew her dad very well.
Knew her dad really well, knew Jeffrey Epstein really well.
He just lived a few blocks away from both of them, right? He was just up the
in New York and
in Palm Beach.
Florida.
He was very close. Yeah.
Donald knows very, very, very well who both Ghislaine and Jeffrey are and were, and all the different businesses that those two individuals have been involved in. And so that's very disingenuous for him to play that card as if they were in Palm Beach.
This was a grand performance yesterday of trapping himself, where he's trying to back it down today, and he can't.
He can't.
It's impossible to back it down. So this is a problem. This is a serious
Yeah.
problem for Donald Trump.
I want to go back to what you were saying there, because you said that he was concerned about where she was staying, about the prison, which is the Brooklyn prison, and about her. Why would he be so concerned about where she's staying?
Because the risk assessment on her dying in prison could inflame this country if this happens. And it's reckless, based on her Bureau of Prisons risk assessment, to hold her in the prison she's being held in this moment. She belongs in a high-profile witness housing custody, like the mafia heads that they try to convert to cooperation. She doesn't belong in that Brooklyn prison or the Manhattan prison where Epstein died. This
Why?
is incorrect, because the risk assessment that's drafted by the Federal Bureau of Prisons prohibits her custody in that Brooklyn prison. There's no way to safeguard Ghislaine Maxwell by the staff in the Brooklyn prison. It is impossible.
I thought they've added a lot of new security around her. But again, we've seen that that's really, we don't know who we're dealing with in terms of the Epstein murder or suicide, but it's certainly, they were able to penetrate even a very, very high security prison, and he was in a high security part of that high security prison. So sure, she's at risk, but they have, I believe, added even more security around her, haven't they?
But their own policy requires her, the Federal Bureau of Prisons policy requires Ghislaine Maxwell to be in a witness housing, not to be in that kind of prison.
The crimes that she's being charged with do match where she is. She's not, these aren't white collar crimes. This is
I'm an eyewitness to the BOP, Federal Bureau of Prisons, risk assessment writings and policy. I dealt with that for years with my custody. And I can tell you that she doesn't belong under the Bureau of Prisons policy in that location right now. So you can charge her with 1,000 crimes. That doesn't change who she is.
Why is President Trump suddenly so concerned about where Ghislaine is staying? I mean, is he worried about her safety because he's worried about her safety, or is he worried about, he's not worried about her safety?
He's not worried about her safety. He's worried about her talking.
That's right.
No, well, I want to distinguish and be concise. President Trump is petrified of what Ghislaine Maxwell will say about him.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's clearly the case. That's clearly what's going on.
And his first wife, Deutsche Bank, had a very deep relationship before President Trump joined Deutsche Bank with Jeffrey Epstein in the same category of private banking.
And earlier, right, with his consulting firm, it was Deutsche Bank that was ultimately offering, that did his platform for the consulting firm. It may not have been his own bankers, but his consultancy worked with Deutsche Bank.
Deutsche Bank could be a major issue that Ghislaine Maxwell could elaborate on that might become very damaging to President Trump. Very damaging.
One would think so, because we saw a federal judge this week. The son of a federal judge was killed. Some people suspect it was related to the Deutsche Bank case. That was it's possible, but there's still this speculation around this particular case, this Deutsche Bank case as it relates to Epstein directly and to Trump. What are your thoughts about? I would actually want the comments. Why did you say I shouldn't ask about this? Because we're worried about another murder being attached to.
I just right now something that hot.
Mm.
My response is to be as careful as possible, because easy leaps are made, and then you find out there are layers and layers and layers to something you didn't know about. This could actually be a madman. They're tying him to a murder out here in California. Or it could be something more orchestrated.
There is a lot we have to learn about what this
prosecutor-
man did, for sure. But I do think it's safe to at least, the stuff we do know about him, that he worked for this company called Kroll. They were investigating Deutsche Bank.
Yes,
they
yes,
were the
they
ones
were.
that were investigating Deutsche Bank.
Yeah,
On
yeah.
top of that, they have a lot of, interesting connections to Russia. Make of that what you will. And,
Right.
and he was a very elaborate hit.
If you want to talk about assassins and mob hits and orchestrated stuff, I study a lot of that. And what you do see in the more scandalous ones and the more sort of like confusing ones is that you have a crazy person involved. There's a bit of insanity going on, a huge instability. And so the question remains, in terms of organized crime, and in this world where, Deutsche Bank is this massive money laundering operation for organized crime, you have to look underneath that and sort of say, is this one of those sort of unstable individuals that gets used and weaponized, or is this just a crazy guy? Is he just crazy on his own?
We're talking about Ghislaine Maxwell, Deutsche Bank, and President Trump's linkage to
Right.
the three parties. We're not off the track with what happened in the news cycle. We're focusing on President Donald Trump's deep involvement with Deutsche Bank, Ghislaine Maxwell's deep involvement with Deutsche Bank through Jeffrey Epstein and through her father, Robert Maxwell, and Jeffrey Epstein's deep involvement with President Trump, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Deutsche Bank. That's what we're focusing on, and that could be incredibly shocking to America for the coming election.
And so when he wishes her well, he's not wishing her well. He's not wishing her well.
He's dangling.
or he's dangling a pardon. I mean, that really is the other possibility. Do you think that he might be dangling a pardon in front of her? Do you think that that's what's going on?
This is a shocking statement made by President Donald Trump. Shocking. And it's got many legs that are not normal, very far from normal, because that language is never used by him except with Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, and Roger Stone.
It's true. He doesn't wish anyone well, ever, except unless they're criminally co-conspirators of his.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen him do that before.
You know the guy.
Not with a woman.
Well, he didn't do it. He didn't do it with Stormy Daniels,
right?
And with the alleged rapes, he didn't do that. He didn't wish anybody well. He didn't wish the victims well.
Sure didn't. In the middle of a coronavirus press conference, where he didn't wish any of the people who were sick from coronavirus or had lost family from coronavirus well.
No.
The only person he wishes well in the entire press conference was Ghislaine Maxwell.
It was wrong. It was wrong. He should not have done that. And he's being criticized for it. It was shockingly wrong.
This is why we speak with Steve. This is why we want to continue to stay on this conversation. This is about the money, everybody. This is about money. So that's where the crimes are. I know there's all this horror that is associated with Ghislaine Maxwell, that she's being accused of, that she's been charged with. And it is horrible, horrible crimes. So just unthinkable.
And actually, that's sort of where we left it off at that part of the interview. Listening to it back, obviously it's a rough cut, but you could get a sense of what he was talking about. And there is a lot of interesting dynamics around Deutsche Bank and around Ghislaine Maxwell and the court case and all of that. So I'll get your thoughts first, and then I want a couple of moments to share something about some of the people involved in this scandal. But go ahead, Greg, or I don't know who wants to jump in. Greg or LB.
Go ahead, Greg.
I'm going to say it's refreshing, I guess, to hear him focus on the money so forcefully, because I've now heard him talk a bunch on these interviews, and I'm talking about Steve now, and his tone of voice is usually the same, but there was almost a sense of urgency in his voice in this particular interview that I've not heard before, where he's talking about the Deutsche Bank connections and basically imploring everybody to focus on the money.
Right.
His talking about, first of all, equating her in the prison with a mob figure, which she
Right.
de facto is, and focusing on the relationship between Deutsche Bank and Trump and Maxwell and Epstein is important. And I think that's the key. That's the critical key to all of this stuff. And LB, what you were saying at the end of the interview before it got cut off was, as horrible as all this stuff is, it detracts us from the thing that's going to take them down ultimately. People love to, even my kids texted me that bogus debunked list of the teenagers that Trump had supposedly raped. And I'm like, that's not, I don't think that's true. Focus on the other stuff. We have to focus on the stuff that we can prove that's actionable. And the thing about the money is you could trace it. Yeah. There's receipts, man.
You can trace it. There's receipts. And again, it's not about saying one crime is worse than another or more important than another or minimizing anybody's pain or any level of criminality. I mean, there is nothing worse than what these people did.
No,
I mean,
it's awful.
They destroyed people's lives, destroyed them.
But they did it as a cover story. They did it for a cover. They would try to cover their tracks. They needed a blackmail scheme to hide all this other stuff they were doing, the laundromat and the arms trading and all of that. This was their way to ensure other people were going to stay quiet.
Well,
and so that's why the underlying crimes are so much more relevant in terms of figuring out exactly what their main goal was.
Here's the way to think of it. And it's going to rock people, but this is how you can get out of your own emotion of it. You're just that reaction, right? And because you should feel the cruelty in what I'm about to say is even worse, okay? Because it's dehumanized. These were dehumanizing individuals. They dehumanized others. The rapes and the molestations were a strategic tactic. That's who they are. That's who those people are.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's on us just so that we can stay present to this information and survive it, because it's like waves of this horror show washing over us regularly. And this is a big part of it, and trying to wrap our minds around, and then people get in and weaponize, the information and do their crazy conspiracies that have nothing to do with reality. And we just need to be as sort of calm and compartmentalized as we can be about going after the thing underneath all of this, going after the financial crimes, going after the money, going after the arms dealing, because that was what was so important to them, that they did this to all these girls. That's
Maria Farmer.
That's their business.
Maria Farmer, who is one of the first victims, in fact, the first, I think, to report a rape to the Palm Beach police, is back in hospital today, suffering from, she's been fighting cancer for a long time, and, is having a tough time right now. And she's back in the hospital, and she does blame she calls them the evil elites, and maybe that's what we can call them, but that's certainly in her mind who she blames, for not only the what they did to her criminally and sexually and all those things, but to that's happened to her body today, and that the cancer that she's fighting, she attributes to them. She believes that that's part of what they brought to her, the toxicity they brought to her. So we're living through a real life tragedy as well. Now we wish Maria all the best, and I know that she's going to pull through this, because she's done this before. She's pulled through before, and we're worried about her, but also hopeful, and we know her strength because she's been through so much. But it reminds you,
and she deserves some of that money, for God's sakes.
Oh God, I mean, she can't even afford a cancer
That
treatment.
this
You know,
is
it's become this billionaire guy
so evil.
takes advantage of this girl who's a art painter, an art student at the New York Art Academy, I think is the name. And you know, she gets taken advantage of first for her art
Gorgeous
and her,
artist.
yeah,
Gorgeous. Yeah.
and then becomes, you know, his employee, but not really his employee, sort of his sex slave. And you've got a you know, that's a tortured past to live with for a long time. And I don't blame her for attributing that cancer to them, because I think there is a level of toxicity when you get that kind of trauma in your body that, I don't know, maybe you don't get out of it that easily.
Can I want to talk about two words that you each said. I think evil elites is one phrase, and compartmentalization is another phrase. We're asking people watching this to try to compartmentalize and take the horrible thoughts and place them to the side so that they can take in and process the information. But this is what these people do. They have to do it psychologically to survive. If you watch the Epstein doc, one of the interesting things about it was listening to Dershowitz talk about what he does for a living. And he's talking about his career as not only a criminal defense attorney and one of the foremost ones, but somebody that finds people that we all pretty much know are both guilty and horrible. And he's the one that swoops in to defend them. And he said in the doc, and I'm going to paraphrase here, as the attorney for them, I just hone in on what can help them and what can win the case, and I cast everything else out of my mind. And I feel like these people, Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell and her father, Trump and his family, or at least his kids, they have this tendency, I think, and the mobs do this too. They put a wall around their families and their associates, and everyone outside that wall can go fuck themselves. That's basically
It's
the
sociopathy.
attitude.
It's social. It's sociopathy, and
it's almost like a eugenics kind of thing in a sense, not a racial eugenics, but in a, we are the elite, we are the chosen, and you people are peasants. It's Orson Welles in The Third Man on top of the in that great scene on top of the Ferris wheel, looking down and saying, "Come on, look at all those specks down there. If I offered you $10,000 for each speck, would you really care, or would you take the money?" That's what these people are, and they're greedy. And there's no bottom to it, and there's no amount of money that will ever satisfy them, and no amount of power that will ever satisfy them.
Well, they only exist because they do view us as being lesser. You know, they have this power structure that their survival depends on us being viewed as lesser beings, and so their entire existence. Also. Exactly that.
Right, because they make their money off of exploiting.
Yes, exactly.
It's not disconnected. They profit off of human misery. They profit off of addiction for the drug trafficking. They profit off of rape for the sex trafficking, especially, you know, they profit off of, you know, near
the money laundering, the crashes.
They profit off of that. They profit off of, you know, blood diamond mining. They profit off of wars. They profit off of our pain. They steal
our money.
And they steal our money.
That they do.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just say this too, because I want to say this. I hope you go into the more of what he had to say, especially about the cooperators
what we're going to do with the Roger Stone part, which is the first part, we'll air it I'll upload it separately as its own podcast, or I will air it on Friday. But I think I'll just put it up as a separate self-contained podcast, and then people can share it. They'll get the context from us on this show.
And so I want to say this because I thought that was going to happen first, and I didn't want to disrupt this conversation. But I know a lot of people were upset when they heard Steve use the phrase "law and order," and he's going to get into that in that section, and we're gonna go through it. We're respecting Steve and what he has to bring to the table in terms of his knowledge and his perspective also means having brutally honest conversations with him. And so nobody holds anything back in this group, clearly. We're just not those people that don't just like,
No,
but
not that crowd.
But we're not that crowd. But it's also important to really to understand somebody and know where they've made a mistake and let them acknowledge what the mistake is around all that.
He genuinely misspoke. I think he didn't mean to say law and order. He meant to say something else, but we'll let him explain it. And, he doesn't apologize.
It's not even in his world.
Yeah.
It's not even his world or his universe that's the way that is for us. And this is the thing to sort of get across is Steve is he's in a different realm of his daily life, his experiences, and also what he's fighting right now and what
he's focused on the victims. That's his only thing that he's focused on, and he doesn't get into politics around those victims because that would disrupt what he's doing. That does not mean that there are not people trying to use the story in whatever way they're trying to use it to weaponize it. But he's still doing what he's doing, which is trying to get the money back for the victims. And, it's a tricky territory for all of us. We're all sitting here playing with a very highly weaponizable narrative. And that's why we keep coming back to the money. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about the victims and the sex crimes because as interesting and titillating as that could be, it isn't where the focus needs to be. The focus needs to be on the money because that's always been the goal. And that's where the crime is.
Right.
And so.
And frankly, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's what they're weaponizing the sexuality around it so that we can't focus on the money. So the more we stay locked into that idea of we're focusing on just the money and on the actual criminal activity, because that's what we can get them on. There's criminal activity, the human trafficking, but 25 years ago, some of it's going to be hard to enforce. But yeah,
it's
this
difficult.
stuff is
without the tapes.
They are tapes.
Without those tapes. So here's the thing also for everybody is, everybody here is very upset about the very real threat that we're facing with another Trump term. Okay. So I'm not going to pretend it isn't my sole focus, right, to make sure that we bring an end to this monstrosity that's going on. I don't want to lose that's why we're here. So we're passionate about that, but it's not like a take down Trump at any, because we know who he is. So we're just trying to expose, if we can just keep exposing who this guy is, not as this horrible human being of racist, sexist, right? But as he's a fucking criminal, right? He's a criminal. He belongs in jail. And let's get to his crimes. And I think people need to prepare themselves. There may not be a demonstrable in terms of a living witness or a tape or even Ghislaine or anybody, offering up Donald Trump as one of these abusers. He might not be in that might not come out. But as you'll see Steve focused on, why he says he blew himself up, right? Talking about Trump is that there is no doubt he's in the financial crimes. He is in there. All right, so let's listen to that part.
Well, we can't listen to that part right now, but we have it later. We're going to play that later. No! So Steve, just actually, I think one of the things that Maria is concerned about right now as she's in hospital is that she is feeling very personally attacked by Alan Dershowitz, who is continuously fighting her in these silly lawsuits, and it just gets so silly what's going on. But there's got to be a time. I mean, you hope that there's a time for people like Alan Dershowitz to have a conscience and a soul or something that he can stop attacking someone who's in hospital right now for a little bit and let her get healthy. Fight her when she's healthy. This is not the right time to be attacking a victim of a sexual crime who shouldn't even be identified when you really think about it, and who's instead sitting in hospital, and he's doing, what any lawyer would tell you that you shouldn't do, and attacking her continuously. And the same thing's happening from the New York Academy. I mean, there's got to be some consequence and shaming for this, because it just, this is not right. This has gotten to a point where they're re-victimizing victims again, and they're doing it in real time, and it needs to stop.
Yeah.
But thought I'll just share that. And I know that maybe we'll try to contact Maria later on, but I just gets frustrated by all of that so much.
Yeah.
So the money, back to the money, it is all about the money, and that's how we win the elections. In terms of what Steve does go on to talk about is he talks about Darren Indyke and Ghislaine Maxwell. Sorry, it's Darren Indyke, that's correct. He's the executive of the state and Epstein's former lawyer. He already might have cooperated or started cooperating. He believes that that cooperation has already begun, which is fascinating on its own because it certainly lends a little drama. And it means that Ghislaine is now not the first person in line for cooperation, but maybe along one of the last people in line for cooperation. And you were comparing it to rolling up a sort of a mob, rolling up a mob organization.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about how that works.
Okay, so how you take down an organized crime syndicate using the law, right? Is you start with the little fish, use a little fish to flip the middle fish, you get the middle fish, you use the middle fish to flip the big fish, you use the big fish to flip the boss, the shark, right? Whoever's at the top of the totem pole. Now, I have issues with that in and of itself. I think we have to reevaluate our entire process of going after organized crime. I do, because it's clearly not working. This guy's president didn't work. Kind of failed because the system got used against itself, and so a lot of stuff has to be rectified in that and rethought. Creative thinking. But here's the result. If she's the last one in, if she really is the last one in, that means she's caught. You don't go for the boss until it's all rolled up. There's nowhere to go.
Right.
The boss can't go anywhere. He could say, I'm not cooperating, I'm not talking, blah, plead the fifth, right? Okay, doesn't matter. We got you. We got you on paper. We got you with eyewitnesses. We have all this testimony. Bye-bye. You could have made it easier on yourself, but you're not going to. So it will now be even worse for you. It doesn't matter. By the time they get to the boss, they don't need the boss. There's no one above.
Right. So they really have gotten to. So at this point, she's nice to have.
She was running the show.
But there is someone they do want. They do want Donald Trump, and I think they'd get Donald Trump through Ghislaine.
I don't know. I don't know that they want Donald Trump. We have to see. It depends on how many financial documents they have their hands on. Is he going to be exposed? Yeah. But there might even be a whole hell of a lot of other people in there too. So I think they want is the financial syndicate. I think they want the financial
in Deutsche
syndicate.
Bank. We know that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell all coexist in that Deutsche Bank private wealth ecosystem. We know that they exist within the real world ecosystem that they were inhabiting together, and we know that they were involved in crimes potential crimes. So there's a lot going on there that makes you think that you're certainly over a target, that you're not far off from potentially proving that the president is involved in something like that. And my money would be that he is somehow involved in it, because just all the indications are that he is. I mean, how else did he get that loan from Deutsche Bank? It makes no sense that he got that loan from Deutsche Bank. And that bank, that section of the bank, is a giant laundromat as far as we can tell.
Well,
that's the reporting on it. Yeah.
We need to keep, I think, reiterating about the Deutsche stuff, that the bank, got its roots and came to prominence by servicing the Nazis, at the time of leading up to the Second World War, and was taken over by American kind of mavericks in the 90s aughts. And in the last 12 years has paid $11 billion in fines, billion with a B, which, as my boss would say, that's real money.
Fines it's real money, but fines are always a small portion of the overall.
And just last week, they paid $175 million just for the Jeffrey Epstein fine.
That was the Epstein, but they paid a huge fine for their role in the 2008 crash. They paid a fine for manipulating the LIBOR rate. They paid a fine for dealing with governments and foreign entities on the U.S. sanctions list. They paid a fine for the Epstein stuff. I think there's something else going on there too that I'm forgetting, but it's just a lot of money. It's a lot of fines. And why are you going to keep doing that? Why are you going to continue to have that business practice unless the money you're making from these seedy clients is so great that it just doesn't make any difference?
Well, Can't keep doing it. I mean, it's illegal at some point. I mean, at some point they're involved in so much illegality, and they're the laundering out of Danske Bank, and that was just outrageous amounts of money.
It needs to be taken more seriously by other countries too, because from what I understand, the UK does not do a particularly good job of prosecuting money laundering.
No,
they fine, but any kind of money laundering that happens there, they just give it to us to do. And
it's hard for them. They love soccer. They love their soccer.
Someone's got to buy the mirror.
They'd rather have their soccer than get the Russian mob out of their frickin' country. Get them out. Get these guys out.
From what I understand, it's a significant investment there that's going on. So the bank itself, it seems to be the nexus of a lot of shady dealings, as we've seen, and as Steve Hoffenberg just spoke about. And the documents from Deutsche Bank, the Trump documents, are eventually going to make their way to Cyrus Vance, the DA of Manhattan. And we're going to take a look at these things. And, why did Trump get that loan? As you said, Zeb, why did Deutsche issue that loan? And the answer is they wouldn't issue the loan unless it was backed by someone else.
Who backed it? Who
could be Epstein, could be the Russians. Who knows? We'll find out.
It could be. It might be Epstein. I mean, there's a likelihood that it could be Epstein, that he could be in there, and it certainly could be the Russians. But Epstein's if you're listing the top few people who might be involved in that, it would be
crazy.
It would be Jeffrey Epstein would be up there, which is why he wishes Ghislaine well, and that he doesn't wish anybody else well.
That's why he wishes her well.
Because
I don't know what's going to happen to QAnon if it's Jeffrey Epstein's name on Donald Trump's.
What's QAnon? I don't think it exists, actually.
Not on Twitter no more.
No, not anymore. Not that we're celebrating that,
so much
but
of it. Yeah,
it's so interesting. There's a thing that you can sort of draw from all of this, and if people are trying to figure out why this matters to them, is what Deutsche Bank does is it legalizes crime for wealthy people. It's okay because if you're a billionaire, we'll launder your money, and it's okay. The politicians will ignore it, and the investigators won't look at it, and you're fine. But you've got to be a billionaire to launder money. Everybody else, you still have to follow the law. But that's where we are in society right now, and that's the battle line that we are fighting. Is the battle line between who gets to follow the rule of law, and do we all follow it, or is there a separate class? And does that top class get to be their own, have their own rules, their own laws, or maybe they're just lawless because they happen to be wealthy? And so that sort of, to me, is how people could understand this fight more clearly.
Yeah, and what will really cook your noodle is they would be billionaires if it wasn't for the money laundering. Right. So I mean, we're at a place with we're a few generations in to some of these original organized crime syndicates and their spawn and their spawn, and I don't, and you end up with, a guy that, Putin had a really good judo wrestling session with has all the uranium, all the extra, you're in charge of all the extra uranium. That was fun. Let's get back on the mat together. Right. That pervert. So it's, there's no merit that got these people to their billionaire status. They're thugs. They're thugs, and they're, that's it.
Well, let's leave it there because you'll be back Friday. We have lots more on Friday.
Oh wait, I know I know you're tired, but let me just check.
No, I'm tired. I can keep going, but it's been a while.
Let me just check. I want to be good for the Periscope.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Followers.
If there's comments, let's check.
It's
check
very
that out.
hard for us. It's very hard for us.
Greg, you wrote a great piece about Noel Castor, who is our guest this Friday. Maybe you can tell people a little bit about Noel.
Oh, he's going to be great. He's a great guest. I mean, he's going to be wonderful. He's very funny, and he knows stuff. He worked on Celebrity Apprentice. He was the handler for various people. In the last, I think, 2 years he worked there, he was the handler almost exclusively for Ivanka Trump.
Oh,
so he knows where all the bodies are buried, and he's been basically taking aim at them and revealing lots of stuff for years now. I mean,
following his Twitter feed for a few weeks now, and it's certainly it's revelatory. There's so many good stuff, so many good notes in there about.
He's so good. He's getting really good. Like he's getting really sharp. Yeah. Not that it wasn't always, but I really think Noel's voice has really zinging in there lately.
No,
So
he's
it's
he's
great.
fantastic. He's one of the he's
Fantastic.
yeah. I can't say enough good things.
and-
He said, wait, in the interview that I wrote, he said,
Sorry, guys, it's really
that-
hot in my house.
yeah,
Thought you were just
I'm
excited to
sitting
be
in the
with us.
only room in here
Like,
that doesn't have air conditioning.
Yeah.
He said that Trump has undiagnosed dyslexia, and that's why it's so hard for him to read. And I want to say that in Mary Trump's book, she talks about his possible undiagnosed learning disability, which squares with what Noel said. So,
Yeah, I mean,
for what it's worth, it confirms that.
in one of his tweets yesterday, he was saying, there's not a big distance between Donald Trump's house and where the Epstein mansion was and where Ghislaine lived, and that they often made stops there throughout the years, and he's very well aware of them, and so is Donald Trump. So
I can't wait to hear from him.
It's going to be really
So
funny.
it'll be great. It's really funny. And it's not just about spilling tea. So I want to give everybody also this about Noel, because even in the news meter, I think it's a big difference between the entertainment industry, and we have our silos out here of like the different, different kinds of businesses within the whole entertainment industry as a whole. Excuse me. And like news organizations in the New York news media scene. And I don't think that journalists really understand what Noel's job was. And I know you prefaced it, Greg, and said like he was a handler, but when you're that kind of job where you're helping people get through their live tapings, right? And from point A to point B, and you're dealing with the talent like that. He spent more time with Donald Trump and Donald Trump's family in that sort of Access Hollywood bus environment, right? That's the environment. It's behind the scenes of them in their sort of power, we're the stars, celebrity horseshit space that they're in, with everybody catering to their every need, and they don't have to be filtered in any way, shape, or form. They're really showing you raw ego all the time.
Yep.
And
in fact, that's when they show it the most, because they want to show off so much.
That's when they show it the most.
So
That's right.
they'll demand.
You know this.
I
You
worked
had
in
talent.
I ran a morning show for 2
You
years
were
in New York
booking.
City, 4 years in New York City.
Yes.
I know how complicated talent can be on those morning shows, first thing in the morning, and
Exactly.
what goes on in the green rooms and the kind of requests you get are just unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And the guy that's taking you from point A to point B and making sure everything's set up for you. It's a big job, actually.
Yeah.
And
they get
so
treated
he
like
was
hell,
with
but
them,
yes, it's a
treated
big
like
job.
hell. But also it's a comic, right? So he's got a comic's mind. Stay away from comedy writers. They're the smartest motherfuckers out there. I'm telling you. Don't mess with them. Everybody, it's not. These are people who can find searing truth and communicate it in a way that most people miss, because they're that smart. They're the smartest ones in my industry, and the smartest writers are the really sharp comedy writers. That's like, just as people, you're like, oh God, shit, that's a big brain. Right. So here they don't, but the Trumps don't know this because they're fucking morons. So here's Noel, having that front row seat to all of that, observing all that. Right. And also being a New Yorker and knowing these people and knowing the world and knowing the street and knowing, like, I can't think of anybody more dangerous for these stupid people. And they had no idea there he was the whole time. And way more time than Mary Trump spent, around them.
Yeah.
And you see what Mary Trump, with her brilliance, right? And her insight, right? In the same kind of thing of like, I'm just sitting here watching these people. I know how they operate. I'm watching the dynamics, and having that sharp mind that she has, and that ability to see through all of the horse shit, even in her own family, and get to the underlying dynamics. And so, those are two right now. Noel and Mary are two really important voices,
because you get to see them in their real world, and it's not an accident that tape was rolling on Access Hollywood in that bus, because they knew what he was like, I'm sure, before he stepped onto that bus. And if they keep rolling, they might get something. That's what you do if you're a smart producer. You're not, you don't do that for everybody. That only happens for the people you sort of expect are going to be like that. So it probably wasn't the first time.
Careful.
Yeah, right. It's a good thing we're stuck at home and there's no handlers.
That's how dumb they are. That's how dumb the Trumps are.
Well, they're still the presidents, still the first family of this country. So we'll get rid of them by November.
Yeah.
I am ready to go to bed soon. So any other thoughts for anybody?
No, I was looking through Periscope and I was just, there's followers that are so great. So we just love you guys. Thanks for following.
Yeah, thanks for being patient as well. Today was a bit of a storm.
Patient.
So I've been editing.
Really
if you're wondering what the red eyes are, it's not what you think. I've just been editing and staring at these screens for so long. They're popping out of my head. So thank you very much for joining us on Narrative Live. We will post the full interview that we did with Steve Hoffenberg a two-part podcast. This one will be the first part, but then we'll also do the part where he talks about Roger Stone. We'll do that as a separate podcast. And it's really good. There's some great, fantastic moments. I'm disappointed we couldn't play it here, but we'll do it in a separate podcast. And we'll see you guys back here on Friday with Noel.
See you Friday.
Cheers.
With
Good night.
Noel.
Right. Good night.
Support Narrative's independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative and check out our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe and download.